Hey guys, this is student Dr. Jeffrey Blair, or Jeff. And today we are going to talk about the topic of puberty and development. Now, it is pretty important for us to speak about this because many of you may either be going through puberty now, many of you may have gone through puberty already, but we are going to speak about sort of the mechanism behind it in a very scientific and medical standpoint, and see if we can understand a bit about why it occurs and how it occurs. So, the first thing to understand is that puberty occurs similarly, but at the same time, very different in males and females. And for that reason, it's important for us to understand on a very basic level what makes a male different than a female. Now, that may sound like a very silly concept and a very silly question to ask, but it's something that if we don't understand, we may not be able to understand why the rest of puberty develops and manifests in the way that it does. So, the first thing that we're going to go over is the difference between a male and a female on a very biological sense. So, the first thing that we have to remember is, or that we have to know, is what a gamete is. So, I don't want you guys to get too confused over this entire lecture, but just try and pick up on some of the important vocabulary here. So the first thing to remember is what a gamete is. A gamete is a cell. Okay, a cell is the basic unit of life, but a gamete is specific and very unique because both men and women have different types of gametes, and these gametes have half of the number of genetic material needed to create life. These gametes again are specific. Men have sperm, female have what's known as an ovum, otherwise known as an egg. Okay, so they're very specific. So we're going to start with the female first. So the ovum or the egg is the female gamete. It's much larger than the male gamete, but it contains the same amount of genetic information, otherwise known as DNA. This information is again half of what is needed to make a full human being. Eventually, when the male and female gametes combine, it has the ability to create a human being, to create life. A woman is born with an exact number of eggs, and that's all the eggs she will ever have in her entire life. Now, this means that a woman can be born with around 500,000 eggs at birth. But by the time she reaches puberty, most of those eggs have been destroyed. Most of those eggs are no longer viable anymore. And she will continue to have a decrease in the number of eggs she has up until she reaches about 40 or 50, when her body no longer has any mature, viable eggs at that point. This is different in males, as we'll see in a little bit. But during puberty is when the first egg becomes fully matured, meaning that that egg is ready and able to go through what's known as fertilization, which is when the sperm and the egg combine. And during puberty, that first egg, um, again, is the first egg to mature. And each month after that, another egg is going to mature one at a time, one at a time. And this is going to be the case for most women. So in males, the gamete is called sperm. Now, the sperm is very unique because it has a unique shape and unique attributes to it. It's very small compared to the egg, but again, it contains the same amount of information that an egg does in a woman. But the sperm is again specific to the male, and its characteristics are specific to allow it to survive in the acidic environment of the female reproductive system. The sperm is housed and produced in the testes. And one thing about the sperm is a male will constantly produce sperm throughout his entire life. Remember, the gametes in the woman she's born with, she has only a certain number of eggs when she's born. But in the male will produce sperm his entire life. Okay, and that's important to remember because that's one of the main differences between the male gametes and the female gametes. Okay, so remember what a gamete is. So now that we have that understood, what about puberty? What is it really about? So puberty begins and is defined by hormonal changes that cause physical, emotional, um, and social development and changes in a young person. And it allows the young person to go from being sexually immature to being sexually mature. And what that basically means is someone will develop the characteristics rather of an adult. That's all it means. So let's look at the two places where we can find these important hormones. The first place is the brain. Now, in the brain, there is a portion known as the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, though it may sound like a fancy word, it is just a part of the brain that is responsible for the majority of the hormones that our body produces. And around the age of 11 or 12, the hypothalamus produces and releases a lot of a hormone called GnRH. When that GnRH is produced throughout the body, it travels all the way to a portion in our body known as the gonads, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, just know that GnRH is the major hormone of puberty. It's a very important hormone during puberty. That is the start and the beginning of puberty. So, as I mentioned, the GnRH is going to travel to the gonads. The gonads are very specific organs in your body, and they're different in men and women. In men, they're known as the testes or the testicles, and in women, they're known as the ovaries. This is where the gametes reside. Again, in men, it's sperm, and in women, it's the ovum or the eggs. The eggs are in the ovaries, the sperm is in the testicles. But not only that, these gonads can also produce hormones. They're stimulated by the GnRH, which comes from the hypothalamus, and they produce their own hormones called testosterone and estrogen. Now, testosterone, which is found in boys, and estrogen, which is found in girls, is what allows for the physical changes that we see in puberty. Okay, so we're going to go over the changes in a minute. So, what I want you to remember up until this point is the difference between men and women is that men have sperm as their gametes, women have ovum or eggs as their gametes. They are found in the testes and the ovaries, respectively. And in those gonads, the testes and the ovaries, they also produce testosterone in boys and estrogen in girls. And both these hormones cause physical changes, which we're going to go through right now. So the physical changes that occur in puberty is actually very predictable. And that's because we all go through stages of puberty. And these stages are different in boys and girls, but they have a lot of similarities. So this is just to show you we have exactly 5 stages called Tanner stages. And your doctor can actually use this Tanner staging to tell you and to be able to see how far along puberty you are. So again, Tanner staging, and we're going to go to girls first. So if someone is in Tanner stage 1, it means they have not yet begun puberty. For girls in Tanner stage 2, it means that they have developed a small amount of pubic hair that is usually found on the labia, and they have developed what's known as breast buds, or the beginning of breast development. Tanner stage 3, the girl's hair, the pubic hair, becomes more curly and coarse, and also breast development starts to grow beyond the buds. Tanner stage 4, the nipple and the areola, which is the dark space around the nipple, starts to project and form what's known as a mound on top of the breast, and the pubic hair becomes even thicker. And Tanner stage 5, which is the last stage, is when pubic hair can also be found on the thighs, and the breast has a very smooth contour without any projection of the areola. So in boys, again, if someone is in Tanner stage 1, this is before puberty has begun. Tanner stage 2, again, there's a small amount of pubic hair that begins, but also the main part in boys is their testes or testicles begin to enlarge. In Tanner stage 3, you have also penis growth as well. Tanner stage 4, there's more penis growth. The hair becomes thicker and darker. And as the same in girls, Tanner stage 5, the pubic hair can also be seen on the thighs. What's also important to remember is in these later stages, Tanner stage 4 and 5, males can also have what's known as nocturnal sperm emission, which is essentially a fancy way of saying sperm can be released from the body while a boy is sleeping. This is normally a sign that that sperm has officially matured and that boy is at the later stages of his puberty and development. Okay, so now I want to go to a particular important topic called menarche, or also called menarche by some people. So, menarche or menarche is actually what is known as the first period a woman will ever have, and this occurs during puberty. And during this time, one egg, one ovum is released from the ovaries, goes into the fallopian tubes, and the body prepares for fertilization to occur. But in this stage, of course, fertilization is not going to occur. And so the young woman is going to have what's known as her period. Now, her first period is called a, a menarche, or some people refer to it as menarche. This is also a time when Israelite girls become young women and they have their young women feast. And it's a time when the young woman begins to understand how to manage her monthly cycles and how to understand the difference between clean and unclean. In the future, I'll go over exactly how a period occurs, how a menstrual cycle occurs. But just know the very first period a young girl has is called her menarche, or again, it can be pronounced menarche. So next, I'm going to go over bone growth. Now, bone growth occurs similarly in boys and girls. However, girls are going to start their bone growth and their growth spurts before boys, but boys are going to have their growth spurts at a longer period and more dramatically. Hence why, in a general sense, boys do tend to be taller than girls. And this is all driven by the amount of calcium in someone's body. So boys tend to have a higher calcium level than girls. Also, what's important to know is that once the growth plates of these bones have closed, there can be no more growth spurts. So once a growth spurt has occurred and it's done, there's not going to be a lot of growth that can occur after puberty, which is why once you reach a certain height, you don't tend to get taller than that final height. So how do we know when we reach the end of the road, the end of this journey of puberty? So what we can say is once someone has reached Tanner stage 5, once the males have developed a deepened voice and mature sperm, and the females have had their first period, also known as menarche, this is normally the end of puberty. And it's also important for us to recognize during this time that there's going to be many changes that occur. For example, for males, a big thing is body odor. That is something that is a sign of puberty. But also, they will begin to be stronger and more muscular. For girls, there's also the development of an increased amount of body fat. But this is not bad. And it's something that girls should be aware of because typically women do need more body fat than men do. And the fat will usually accumulate in their lower abdomen, in their breast, and in their lower body. And this, again, is all done very naturally. And that's something that young girls should see as being a very normal part of progression in puberty. It's also important to recognize that during this time, young people and boys and girls are not only going through physical changes, but also through cognitive or brain changes. The brain continues to develop so that as young people, you can make sound decisions and you can interact in society in a very normal social way. So again, that was a very quick overview of what puberty is in a nutshell. Take some time if you have to go back and review some of the slides or watch this video again. But remember, it all starts with hormonal changes, which cause physical changes. And again, we have the staging and the signs of puberty that we can use to determine how far along through puberty an individual is. So again, that's puberty and development. And at some point again, I may do a video to speak about the details of the menstrual cycle and a woman's period. But until next time, thank you guys for listening and for watching. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.